Greetings, this is Rabbi Aaron Boxt once again from Temple Beth Shalom in Ocala, Florida. I noticed that I had not recorded my podcast for this week yet, and I hope that you will forgive me, but it's been a little bit. I'm not sure that crazy is the right word because, it certainly wasn't crazy here in Ocala. But with Hurricane Idalia coming this week, there were a lot of preparations that were made and things that were closed and shut down in order to prevent what really was not that bad of a situation for us, but was much worse for lots of others, preventing it from becoming worse than it was. And I'm very blessed to say that, and thankful to say that. While we did receive quite a bit of rain and wind and some loud thunderstorms, for the most part, we really braved pretty well. Not brave. We had a situation in which we did pretty well. And I want to just send a shout out to all of the EMTs and other first responders, many of which, or several of which, belong to Temple Beth Shalom, for the work and commitment they did and they made to really ensure not only our safety here in Marion County, but also throughout the area and the state of Florida. If you have not had a chance to thank a first responder, whether it be a doctor or an EMT or a nurse or a dentist or anyone really that has to, even veterinarians deal with our who take care of our animals and our furry friends. These are really important people to thank, and firefighters, police officers as well, and anyone that really helps us to remain safe and out of danger. So, what I want to talk about this week is actually what happens in the aftermath of a hurricane or a tornado or any major catastrophe, whether it be weather, whether it be human caused or whatever. There's a very famous story of the 1989 hurricane that hit not hurricane, excuse me, earthquake that hit San Francisco during the World Series, and a lot of people were died, and a lot of people were injured, and a lot of people after this happened were asking all kinds of questions. How did God let this happen? Why would God let this happen? And so on and so forth. And I think that they were looking at it the wrong way. Kushner, Harold Kushner said, you need to look for God in the people that responded, the people that helped, that showed up to help. The EMTs and the first responders that went to save the people that were badly injured or who needed to get out of that situation, who needed to be taken into safety. That's where God is, and the same thing goes for a hurricane or tornado or any kind of catastrophe. I believe really God doesn't God plays as much of a role as we let God. I don't believe that God causes these things to happen. I think we are human beings and we make mistakes. We do all kinds of crazy things, and we that definitely affect our environment. I'm not going to get into a political conversation about the anything that has to do with the dynamics regarding whether or not we are affecting it, or environmental influences from human influences and so on and so forth. I'm not going to start talking about that, but we do influence the environment. We do influence weather, and it's man-made. Not all of it, but we have to think about where God is in those moments. God is in the people that are working to solve global warming or other kinds of issues like that. We have to look for God in the people that are going out of their way, breaking their backs to take care of those who aren't able to necessarily take care of themselves, those who have become victims of these catastrophes, who are sometimes lost in a world of hurt and frustration and anger because of what's going on. And we often forget that. We want to blame God, but really it's not God. It's we need to look in the mirror and see what we're doing in these moments. And that's not always an easy way to come to any kind of understanding about these negative things, because sometimes things are so bad for people that they don't want to hear. They have to look for blame. They don't want to hear that they did something wrong. And I will say that I don't believe that when bad things happen to good people, those good people are bad or have done bad things. I just think sometimes life stinks and sometimes bad things happen, and we have to work around it. We have to respond, not react. And yes, when people do bad things, it can negatively affect other people around them. It can negatively affect their neighbors. It can negatively affect people in the town that they don't know. You may make a decision and wind up hurting somebody else that you don't even know, because you didn't even know you were doing anything bad or anything wrong. And it's hard to hear that sometimes. It's hard to it's almost impossible to understand it all the time, for sure. But even in those moments when we think that we're making all the right decisions and we think that we're doing all the right things, sometimes we're not. Sometimes we don't know. And when we make those errors in judgment, God didn't make us do that. God didn't make us make those errors in judgment. It happens. This is a terrible example, or maybe it's not, but I think of the movie Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer certainly did not intend all the negative things that happened out of all the decisions he chose to make, that he did. And as a matter of fact, when it came down to it, he was almost blamed for all of the bad things that happened, when really they weren't even his fault. Yes, the initial decisions that were made, the initial research, the initial foundations of the bomb, the atomic bomb, were his. But had he known what was going to happen, I'm certain that he would have maybe done differently or made different decisions. And I think we learned that in that movie, Oppenheimer. And this is an example of a man-made decision, a man-made invention that caused tremendous losses of life. Human error, human mistakes. Now, obviously, hurricanes are weather related, but think about how the temperatures have warmed. Think about how all of the water is warm. Think about these terrible heat waves that we're all across the country experiencing. I mean, the fact that it's September tomorrow and it was in the 90s this week, and it's supposed to be in the 90s or high 80s next week in September. Now, I know we're in Florida, but still. I mean, I think of my mother-in-law, who is experiencing a heat wave almost the entire summer, and it was over 100 degrees most of the summer in Houston, Texas. Now, obviously, Houston's not a place that gets cold in the summers, but 110 degrees for weeks on end? Yeah, this has got to be the result of the decisions that we have made or are making. And so where is God in all that? Well, God is in the decisions that we make in response to these negatives. Not in reaction, but in response. A response is different from a reaction in that a response takes time to think about. A reaction is a split-second decision. And reactions often are more detrimental. And a response can be thought out and actually result in something that could be beneficial. So let's get back to the original topic. Where is God in all this? We are created B'Tselem Elohim, in God's image. Therefore, we have the ability to create and we have the ability to destroy. It depends on how we do and the decisions that we make and how we act and react and respond to determine whether or not we can continue creating or whether we continue destroying. And we each have this. And this is a huge burden for us, but we have to take it. As we come down to the end of the month of Elul, as the new year, the new Jewish year approaches, let us take some time to think about how we can create and make positive changes instead of destroy and make negative changes. And may each of us have a much more cool, may be much cooler as we enter into the fall. And I'll see you again next week, or I'll talk to you again next week.